Is a midlife crisis a myth? We're going to talk about that. Welcome to another episode of The Good, Bad, and Ugly of Business. I am your host, Catryn Becker. In this podcast, we talk to successful people from all different kinds of industries, from different professions, because we want to learn what they have learned in their career that has made them so successful. Because behind every successful person is a string of failures, and we actually learn more from our failures than we do from our successes. So let's learn about their failures so that we can either avoid them completely or we can fail faster through them. I'm really excited for this guest. She and I just met, but we already had such a great conversation and so many parallels in our lives and journeys. She is a holistic career coach, Reiki master. She's created an Oracle deck. And if you don't know what that is, we're going to talk about it. Lynn Mull, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I know. How fun is it to get into the nitty-gritty of, failing and like you said, it's the good, the bad, the ugly. And I love it because that's where the juice is. Let's get
It,
there.
it is. And you and I discussed, we both have kids around the same age. And I know for my kids that they have grown up in a world where Instagram, even though they don't have accounts, they still know of this thing. And everything is always so perfect on social media that when my son fails, he struggles and he doesn't know how to work through things. And it's like, buddy, that is part of the process. We got to learn through this.
Totally. I learned in coaching years ago, one of the instructors said, instead of saying the word fail, it's from all I learn. And I love that because
Mm.
we have these bumps in the road, and same thing with the kids, things that I work with my two girls on. It's the same things I coach my adult clients. Sometimes it's the simple stuff we forget. It's like, you know what? I didn't do great on that test. Well, what did we do? Were we distracted? Were we this? Were we that? Or I don't like my teacher. Guess what? You don't get to pick your boss. You don't
Right.
get to pick, who you sit next to at work all the time. Like it's not this perfectly aligned situation. You still have to figure out how to work around it, through it, or the famous elementary school group project. There's
Mm.
always lots of juice in there too.
Well, I mean, there's juice in all levels. And as I started, we talked about the midlife crisis myth. You and I are both in our 40s. I remember, as we discussed earlier, of the over the 40, when you turn 40, it's the over the hill party and everything's
Right.
black and it's like life is over for you. I feel like my life is just beginning. It's really getting good and hitting strides. So, what is kind of midlife mean to you, and what does midlife crisis mean to you?
I really think that it is a call to clarity. I don't think it has to be a crisis. I do think our bodies start to change. We notice maybe going up the stairs, a knee. I know I sneezed last week and my back hurt. It's like we notice things maybe. And so we start to pay attention to different things in 40 plus, or some people describe it as if they've had kids. Midlife doesn't have to necessarily be an age, but we move into this, like we said, social media, or our parents are reminding us that they had this midlife crisis. And you think of the guy buying the Porsche
Yeah.
and selling all of his furniture and living in a bachelor pad or whatever those movies are about. But in reality, I think it's like, hey, I have experience. I've lived a huge chunk of my life, probably had some major milestones that were both good and bad. And now I'm very much more clear on what I want, what I need, and how to set boundaries to take care of myself. Now, I'm not perfect, even as I've studied this subject and interviewed people on midlife, but I think it's the ability to assess with a really zoomed out approach.
Hmm.
Instead of like in our 20s, for example, I know I was like in it. I was like, oh, I can't believe that girl was late to brunch, or I can't believe that person said that to me at work. Like we're really in the micro, the details. And at 40, you're like, well, or midlife, how do I move forward knowing what I know now? We've got that whole encyclopedia building us up. But I don't want people to get bummed out about it because we do have this experience.
Hmm. I always think of it as like, and it's this isn't the best visual example because it's not exactly the intent I mean, but do you remember in Ghostbusters when the first one, when Rick Moranis' character and Sigourney Weaver's character turn into those like awful dog creatures at the end?
Right.
Right? So I envision like all of the expectations and
Mm,
stories and beliefs and other crap that people pile on us is like the outer part. And midlife is like us breaking out of it and kind
yeah,
of
when they have,
yeah, when they come out at the end and there's exactly, it's like this breaking. And so I feel like that's where the crisis comes from, is people feel like it's part of them is breaking, but it's really the parts of them that aren't
mm,
us breaking away. Because I think about like
yeah,
older women, like think about like Cloris Leachman, Betty White, these women that just don't give a damn because they're
I
so
agree.
themselves.
I agree. But for some reason, they were the Golden Girl-esque vibe was given this really old, I think they were in their 50s. Like they really played up the older age moment. I think there's vibrancy, like you were talking about, in 40, in knowing, and you're the only one that can break you out of that dog, gremlin, concrete. Yes, there's some help along the way, or you can touch base with someone to get help. But it's like, who the hell am I?
Mm.
And who am I going to be when I get out of this gargoyle like shell of myself? And it's like, okay, work told me to climb a ladder. Oh, there's no ladder. This is what I want to do. Or my parents thought I should XYZ. And it's releasing those shoulds, like you said. And the best part is finding that core, that inner compass, that North Star. And it can be shocking to those around us. And sometimes those closest to us really feel the heat when we're breaking out. But I think it's the best. I think it brings that vibrancy and that like
Love that word, vibrancy.
I don't care. I'm gonna go do this. And not that we don't care, but it's like I'm doing this for me. That's not true. We do really, really care. It's I'm doing this for me, and I understand this might not be what you expect of me, but this is like I'm very clear.
Well, and you know, I love that the word vibrancy, and I've never really thought of it until just this moment of how it's vibration.
Mm.
When we're at a high vibe, we are vibrant. My mind just blew. Oh, and that ties in to how you now do Reiki and have really understand more the energy that's moving within us, through us, connecting us all. Talk a little bit about that journey because that's a newer part of your world as it is for me as well.
Yeah, so Reiki is not religious for those who've never heard of it. It is Japanese based and it's a spiritual practice, not unlike as I've studied over the years. I grew up, reading. I was Catholic growing up, went to Catholic school, so had some basis there, took some religion classes in college, and then studied yoga in San Francisco, Yoga Sutras. There is a similar idea, despite it being really quite scientific, that we're all made of energy. So the chair I'm sitting on, the computers we have are made up of atoms, neurons, like that is the science. When my daughter last year studied Einstein and all these theories, Benjamin Franklin, it's really the study of these electric currents and how, in some ways, with the lights around me now, the currents are, moving through one way to give us light and electricity. But in our bodies, we get these feelings of stuckness. Like I joked about my back going out. That's an old emotional
Mm.
energy stuckness. And if I'm not really, really conscious about working through some old stories, some old patterns, get stuck in my lower back. And I'm sure other people are like, oh, when I get stressed, I feel it in my shoulder, right? It's these commonalities where we get stuck. And my mom had cancer when I was 32. She was diagnosed emergently with colon cancer,
Oh, wow.
never took care of herself. And my dad, my sister, and I, and many of her friends spent 8 years taking care of her. She's alive and it was incredibly torture filled for her between
Mm.
treatments and surgeries. But what I noticed was that in her not taking care of herself, I wanted to go the other direction. So I'm like so good at preventative care, Western. And then I added this Eastern component. And I remember exactly where I was when I was listening to a book of the woman who then became my Reiki master. Her name is Kelsey Patel. her book was called Burning Bright, and it talks a lot about many, many different practices from meditation to tapping, all these things. And at one line in the book, I was on a bike, I had AirPods in, I was listening to an Audible, which I know you and I both love, and
Mhm.
the line was something to the effect of, if any part of this book interests you, follow the breadcrumb. I got home from my bike ride, I clicked on her website, I signed up for Reiki 1, and I never looked back. And it's just about, the thing I love about Reiki is at its simplest, it's just for today. That's how the meditations start. Just for today, I will not anger. Just for today, I will be humble. And you can make up your own. You don't need to do the 5 that Reiki starts with. Like, how great is that?
Yeah,
Just for today, I'm going to take care of myself.
it's so doable.
Yeah. And it's not a feeling of suffering. It's not a feeling of guilt. It's not a feeling of, it's true self-care, and it can be done in 5 minutes or it can be done all day. You could have a self-care day, which maybe I need to do that actually.
You're like, that seems like a really good little niggle, little nudge in the right direction.
I don't know. Maybe I need to do that before school gets out.
But you weren't always doing this. You were on Wall Street, you were in finance, you were in mergers and acquisitions. I mean, in a lot of ways, when I tell people I was from engineering, they think like, how could engineering and energy work and mindset? Like they seem like they are on opposite ends of the spectrum. To me, it's makes complete sense. So what is that like for you? And do you get that kind of question a lot? Like, how does one person have both of these pieces within them?
I do get that question. And I talk about moving from Wall Street to wellness and then sort of centering back in. There are times and places where we have to crank or we want to learn or we have the desire and hyper motivation to stay in those corporate spaces or hyper structure. I still love structure, still love structure. Um, I sort of have plans for every day of my week as it is. But Wall Street was very good for me in the way that I had to figure out how I wanted to be a leader. And like you, I was tapped for those special projects, or Lynn, you see things differently than other people. And so I was really good at taking these huge ideas that someone up at the Bank of America Merrill Lynch heavens would like send, they would send down, like, we've got to do this in the next 2 years. And I was really good at breaking it down. And so for me, when I got hyper frustrated and felt that my environment was not one I could trust, there was a lot of post COVID and in COVID at the end of my career. There was a lot of backpedaling. A lot of it was people really pitting against each other. And I
Mhm.
just thought, I want to work more in a team environment. I want to work with people, have higher impact. But I really learned how to be a leader there, like how to hold space for people, how when an associate or someone from another team would come to me crying because of something that was toxic or unhealthy for them on their team. Like I was really learning how to operate, coach, sometimes give the tough love, which I still do today. So I think we really learn from all of it, even if I'm not redesigning organizations and hiring and firing in the same way that I was.
Mm. Wouldn't it be great if, something that I had as a misconception when I started my career was kind of around the HR function and
Mm.
thinking that they are, it's human resources, thinking that they were there to support me, especially I was, fresh out of college, never worked before. I'm in this very male dominated cement plant is where I started out. I had the hard hat, I was literally boots on the ground in my steel-toed boots. And I needed support in how to navigate that. And I thought HR was the answer. And it wasn't necessarily in that case. And that's, as I've grown in my career, I know that's not the role they're meant to have, but it almost feels like there's a missing component into our modern
Mm.
cultures, that the reason that why so many people are seeking coaching or leaving careers like you and I did. We were great top performers, and yet there wasn't enough in the corporate space to keep us
No, no, it's why aren't we humanizing work? And when you and I started in our careers, I used to take, there've always been personality tests or versions of strength finders. Back in the day, it was
Oh,
DISC
I
was
love
really,
strength finders.
yeah, but the Myers-Briggs is, no one talks about it anymore, really. But they would always say, take this personality test or, communication style test. Take it as if you're at work. Don't take it about your personal life. But the reality is, today, we understand that you bring yourself to work. So you and I both had crazy mornings.
Yes, we
You
did.
had weather related kids. Are the kids going to make it to school? I had a call from the nurse right before we got on together. And we brought that to the podcast, whether we like it or not. You and I settled in and we had an intentional moment, but not all work is like that. Like, not all work is like, let's breathe for 5 minutes before we go into this meeting. So, how do we allow the human being who had a crappy morning or an unsettled, crazy morning to show up and check in with each other? I do think there's room for HR to have a little more compassion there, but I think that's what you and I bring. It's like, how do we help people show up as themselves and still be successful in a workplace? Or how do we help them shed that layer? Like, I think of a snake, all these snakes are out and about in the spring. It's like, how do we let them shed that skin so when they show up at home, they're not bringing all of it,
Yeah,
even if they have to operate in a hospital system, operate at a plant, operate in a very suit dominated environment. I wish it was more human. And that's why that's sort of my mission, right? It's like, I'm going to show up, I'm going to lead as a human. It takes more time. That's the reality. It takes more time to slow down, or people think it takes more time. I think it's healthier for retention.
for sure. For sure. And, my husband and I are rewatching the series Ted Lasso. I don't
Oh,
know if you watched that one. It's got so many great human points to it. And there's a point in season two, I think, or season three, I'm not sure, but where the main character, Ted Lasso, has a panic attack and it comes out in the news. And as everyone's hearing about it, they're saying like, oh, he's not fit to do this because he's has this other struggle that has nothing to do with what his skills are at work. And there's this, it's set in London, in England, and this older man comes up and he goes, well, thank goodness my father didn't have a panic attack on the beaches of Normandy, or we'd all be speaking German. And
I don't remember that exact line, but I remember the panic attack episode.
well, I just watched it last night, and so it's really great timing because I'm bringing up like how far we've come and at least being able to talk about these kind of things
Right.
and understand that we're all people. So just to acknowledge, like, we have made some strides, but also in the same breath, we're still not done yet. We're still in the middle of the ride.
And I think you can do it by, I don't know about you, but well, I know this about you, even though we've just met, is like, I don't like small talk. And yes, sometimes you have to talk about the weather. Yes, of course. But I don't ask really, how are you today? Unless I'm talking to perhaps complete stranger in the grocery store line. But it's like, if I know you and I interact with you, especially a coworker that you talk to 12 times a day or emailing, it's like, hey, how was that soccer game for your kid this weekend? Or you were replanting your garden. Is there anything that's like really raging? My mint overtook that weed. It's a weed, and having this dialogue where you actually connect, it's so much better because we are lonely, this loneliness crisis. I got a recommendation to join. Are you lonely? Join our group of an author I follow. She's a psychologist. I'm like, huh, that is so incredibly interesting. That can we be less lonely at work?
Yeah. Well, and I think one of I really loved the pandemic for the fact that it did bring us, like, we were all of a sudden letting each other into our homes. Now we're on video calls at work. We now know that someone's got kids or dogs or birds, all these different things about each other that we didn't realize
Right.
before. And
right?
I actually felt in such a moment of isolation when we were in lockdown, I felt more connected to my coworkers.
Right. And you knew that the inside of their house or their apartment, or
Yeah.
you knew.
Yeah. I could see how their house was decorated, or, a family member walking by, like all of that kind of stuff. And I think that was a really nice moment that we all were able to experience that. And I know a lot of places have gone back to being in the offices now, but there's still ways to connect that and bring that back in, I think.
I think that that human element in that connection, part of what I worry about with hybrid, I love hybrid work. I love it. I love it. I love it. I think it's so healthy and realistic to
Yes.
freaking throw a load of laundry in or stir your pot roast in the silly whatever machines that cook our food for 12 hours. But like, that's realistic. But how are people going to find love? Like, remember how we always used to date our coworkers or like go out to happy hours? It's like we're
Yeah.
missing that. So how do you bring it back? You bring it back through conversation. You bring it back through, well-being. And I have this article I'm about to hit send on. I know we weren't really intending to talk about it, but it's like, should wellness be in the workplace? That's the title of the article. And I wish it didn't have to be. I
Mm,
wish that there were boundaries at work, but we have blurred the lines. And that certainly went crazy in COVID in a good way, like you're saying. But it's like, could we pendulum back a little bit and let people? I remember I used to have to tell people I had to use the bathroom in COVID. I'd be like, I need to use the restroom. I'm going to be 2 minutes late to my next call. Or can we end a little early so I can pee? Like, what? Like, that was the other extreme of like so on. And so, like, how do we I don't know. What do you think for those still hanging in the corporate world and we're like, hey, I can get my work done. I'm 38 years old. I don't want to have to tell someone I need water.
right? That we need a bio break. Yeah, that's such a good point. And I think, it seems like our culture is so heavy on extremes
Yeah,
that there's very little, like our bell curves are like two humps of the camel and not the single hump of the camel.
I know. You're on a podcast with an engineer and I'm an econ major when you talk in graphs, like, that's how aligned we are, people. We've got the barbell graphs, we've got two humps of the same. I love it. I love it. No, it's
It's
true.
it's so good. And it's so good. Um
Why do we go so extreme though? It's like let people work from home and give them some grace. Give yourself grace. If you're leading a team, give your team some grace. Even if the people above, like, does it really matter in those 5 minutes? Now, again, I'm not working, you and I are mostly not working with people who are managing, an assembly line in an Amazon factory. Like that's a
right,
different story.
right.
But to like have a professional career, I think it's gone to the place where I know I'm being hired to give talks on wellness and how to take practical pauses in the day. And part of me is like, I used to be able to do that when I was 20. And I used to be able to leave the office and like twice a week, we would go out to a real lunch.
Mm.
My 20-year-old buddies, we would go out to the local salad place in San Rafael, California, and we'd go to the Taco Tuesday place and get the deal, get the buffet, because that's what we could afford. But I wish, I almost wish we were out of business, but I think we're in business because people want to, and they know their energy, to your point about vibration, like they know their energy's off and they know the energy of all their coworkers is like ping ponging.
Yeah.
Like, just like take a breath and have a moment and give yourself 5 minutes between meetings.
I worked in industry and manufacturing, and so the big thing was having a safety moment before meetings. And
Mm,
and I'd always think like, well, why can't we have a wellness moment too? Where it's just one tip or just a minute, 60 seconds of like some counting breathing, right? Where we're just actually taking some deep breaths. That's such an easy thing to implement. But just to kind of close the loop on what you were saying about being out of balance and taking these breaks, and I think it's so much to do with our phones. I mean, you can get an email or get on a Teams message on your phone, text message every hour of the day. So I think to your point about letting people manage their time, it's not like they're leaving the office and they have no ability to continue to work. Because that's the mentality, right? Is if you're not at work, you only work at work, but that's not true anymore.
Sure. I
So
do miss the BlackBerry keyboard. I will always be in favor of that BlackBerry coming back. I
I
miss
felt
it.
so cool when I had my BlackBerry and I was traveling all the time. So I got upgraded to
Me
first
too.
class a lot. So I'd be in first class on my BlackBerry, being like, I am the coolest person ever right now.
I remember one time a guy complimented me on how good I was on the BlackBerry. He's like, I'm like, that's right. I mean, it was like the best compliment
You're like,
anyone
I feel
ever
so
gave me.
seen.
Oh my God.
Oh,
The no, you're right. It is the implementation and how do we, I tell people turn away from I won't do it now, but turn away for 30 seconds from your screen. Literally turn your back on your screen and take a minute. How do you want to show up for this meeting? How do you want to give feedback? How do you want to leave the day? Like end your day?
yeah.
I used to put on I started in COVID. I should have started it earlier, but I used to put on like a wind down song at the end because the kids are home, they were homeschooling or some version, and I would, sort of clean up my desk. And then I would play this like peaceful, it would change a lot of Trevor Hall. I would just like chill out, would bring my vibe down and music's vibration too. So
100%.
having this moment where I'm like, okay, this is my 2-minute break. When the song's done, I have to go get dinner or do the next thing. But it doesn't take that long, to your
It's
point.
such a great tip. Just one song. Pick that one song. Maybe don't pick Bohemian Rhapsody if you don't want to be there for like 8 minutes, but
Or maybe you do. Maybe you need an 8-minute wind down because that was the old commute. You'd like be able to chill out or read your book on the subway when I lived in Manhattan, or like we were, you and I traveling, we would have these like built-in quiet.
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
But I want to kind of wind down our conversation to connect the dots
We're doing it.
with the messages that we can get through ourselves. And you and I have really strengthened that practice within ourselves. I think everyone has the ability to listen to those messages, but it does take time and it takes practice to build that muscle. But you've created something that can really help people do that while they're learning those skills. So I'd love you to go more into about the Oracle deck and kind of what that is and how people to use it and kind of break it down for people that it's such a great tool that we can add to our toolbox.
Yeah. So the 24 Oracle deck was created. I had done, for those who have heard of it, I cannot recommend it enough. I did the Artist Way, which is a series of weekly prompts and morning pages and things like that. But every week there are ways to get creative. And I've always been a writer of sorts, so that writing part wasn't hard for me. But about week 7-ish, the book instructs you to take a date, an overnight date alone with yourself. And I went away and I brought I have them sitting right here, a huge number of Sharpies. I had a big post-it note. I had a bunch of journals and a book. I had dinner reservations by myself and I ended up creating the Oracle deck. And the 24 Oracle deck is because I was born on the 24th of a month, but also there are 12 full moons, which we all know about. All the full moons, we talk about it. ERs are crazy. You're like, oh, is it a full moon? People are driving me off the road. But then what about all the new moons? And thinking about the cycles of waxing and waning, and especially we always feel like we have to be on, like we were talking about, but letting ourselves know that there are phases. And so there are very, very, very simple designs on each of the cards. It is not tarot, it is not future facing, it is not fortune telling. An oracle deck has no rules. And all I would say to people is if you need an anchor, and our mind swirls. We're thinking about grocery lists, or we're thinking about a multitude of things, our kids. If, we're thinking about later this evening or this weekend, things happening, it's like, how do you find clarity within yourself? You stop. But if you can't even have a moment where you want to breathe or sit there with your palms facing up, pull an oracle card. And the oracle card is really to anchor you in a thought or a word, or forget all of it and just look at the image and create this moment of peace. And I wrote 100-page little booklet to go with it. So if you feel like you want a few more prompts, or you want a few more ideas on how to use an oracle deck, it's there for you. I will give all of the listeners a discount code to put in the notes, in the show
Oh,
notes,
fantastic.
for 10% off. And also, you and I came from very regulated worlds, very a lot of rules. And Oracle deck, the best thing, no rules. You can do whatever. You can pull one once a month. You could pull one every day. You could pull one 5 times a day. There are no rules. And I love that, because whether it's my deck or someone else's, it's a way to have a moment. So that I have had an experience where I've taken Oracle cards and put them in my purse and been like, I've had a really hard week. We all have. Be like, self-love, that's my card today, self-love. And I'll be, you know, transacting with someone and ready to burst into tears, and there's that card. Or you're
Mhm.
about to go into a meeting with someone you really don't want to meet with. You're like, self-love, let's be, it's these quick reminders. That's all you need to get into that intuitive gut.
Yeah. Re-anchor, recenter, rebalance.
Rebalance.
I'm excited and looking forward to your deck, the one that I currently use. It's just got a lot of questions and prompts and things to think about. And so when I do feel called to pull a card, I sit with it and I have it out on my desk to look at until I feel that I can answer it. Because sometimes it feels like, oh,
Interesting.
this has got a lot more to it. I need to really sit with this, mull it over. And once I feel like complete with it, then I'm like, okay. And I put it away until I feel called to pull another card. So there's no wrong way to do it. It's just however you feel it. Like no one taught me to do it that way. That's just what sounded and felt right for me. So I went with it.
I have a friend up in Connecticut. She happens to own a crystal store, but she and I are aligned in a lot of ways. And she is obsessed with elements, air, water, like that's her thing. Mine's the moon, hers is elements. And she pulls one for each element. And then she also sort of will be like, we're in the season of air. And so that card will represent where she needs to let the flow, inhale, exhale. Where does it need to move around and not get stagnant? So really freedom in that. And you want to let it ruminate and sit on your desk. And I think it's just a cool way. I think we all are looking in corporate America. The one thing they actually do really well is give accolades or feedback constantly. So you sort of knew where you were at, almost like you're in school, like our kids' age,
Yeah.
where you're like, I got an A on this test. And then you go out into the real world and we're all like, did I do that right? Am I mothering well? I mean, the kids will certainly tell you if you made a bad meal, but otherwise you don't get a lot of feedback. And so, sometimes it's just the confidence, like, hey, I'm feeling like I'm going to publish this article and it's a little saucy. Is this the month? Is this the week? Is it, and so I'll ask a question of the universe and myself. And sometimes that card just gives me that little boost of confidence, like, all right, the universe has my back. I'm going to do this. I'm going to publish it. It feels a little nerve-wracking, but here I go.
Oh, I love that so much. You and I could we could talk for so long, and I think we'd find even more places
I
of
know,
alignment. And
synchronicities.
oh, it's so beautiful. Please let us know the best way to work with you. I mean, I'll put the links all into the show notes. We'll have the link to your cards and to your deck for people that want to start there. But what are other ways that they can work with you?
Sure. So keeping it simple, my website is lynnmull.com. And I'm pretty active on Instagram, although I missed your message this morning because of the wacky morning, but _ Lynn Mull. And I do coaching as well as lots and lots of speaking. And I always integrate the Reiki and the energy clearing that people can let more in. And just shoot me an email, hello@lynnmull.com, all available on my website as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad we got to meet and that
Yes.
we didn't let the hiccups of the morning prevent this meeting from happening. So this has been fantastic.
No, and we both wore pink. So I think all things, we kept our power on, we kept our Wi-Fi on, we did it. I love it. I love the brightness we brought to today.
I know the weather has been like the lightning and thunder has been going off, and I'm like, come on, power, you got this.
I know. I love it.
Well, thank you again so much. And to the listeners, thank you so much for being here. I know you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. So please make sure to like and subscribe to this podcast. Share it with a friend who you think might be interested to learn more, because that's how we can all expand and grow, just by sharing knowledge. Until next time, everyone, take care.